Hello, my loves, and thank you for joining us. I have Jim Duggan with us today from RIA Home Inspections, and we are rounding out our home inspection series. Jim, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I have been a home inspector for 25 years, and I have worked for Residential Inspector of America that entire time. I moved to Atlanta in 1998 and started my career, and I have completed just over 10,000 home inspections.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. Jim, I hope to say that I have sold 10,000 homes in the next 25 years. I love that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about RIA. I personally have used them a lot. It's probably one of my favorite inspection companies, not because you're here, but that's why I called you. Tell me a little bit about RIA and what they offer.
Right, so RIA is a family company. It started as a husband and wife team back in 1989. And it has grown tremendously since then, and now we operate in 3 states and several different cities. And we are a full-service home inspection company. Of course, we do home inspections, but we offer other auxiliary and ancillary services like pest control, termite letters, radon testing, mold testing, pool inspections, pre-drywall inspections, just basically what the modern home buyer needs during the process.
Another thing that I love that you guys offer is your home warranties.
Yes, the home warranty is a big deal. Some companies don't have home warranties. That was a game changer for us. We started the home warranty company probably it's been 6 or 7 years ago, and that is that gives a lot of comfort to buyers through this process.
Well, I feel like it also gives you that guarantee of like, hey, we inspected it, and we also are offering this home warranty. We're that confident in our inspection, so I think that's really awesome. So for the non-realtor potential seller or purchaser, right? What are some of the major items that you feel like need to be really looked at during a home inspection?
Right. So we know from experience that the number 1 and 2 concerns of nearly all buyers is what? HVAC and roof.
Always.
Right? So I think it's a good idea for someone who is about to list their home to be sure that their HVAC systems are in good condition and that their roof is in good condition. That is what we get the most questions on. And that, of course, is what we pay a lot of attention to. So when people are ready to list a home, knowing that that is going to become an issue, even if it's in good condition, people still want documentation of that.
Absolutely.
Also, I think that what really helps during a home inspection is to have the house actually inspectable. When people live in a house for 25 or 30 years, you tend to fill the space that you live in with stuff. And it can be difficult to get around stored items and lots of furniture, lots of window coverings, things like that. So when the house is kind of organized and is clear, I think that the quality of the inspection is better. The client feels better. And also I think that the seller is, when they have a house more accessible, they're really showing that we really don't have anything to hide here.
Exactly.
And come through our house and take a look.
I completely agree. And typically those homes are, they're more marketable to begin with. Like when you have garages full and you can't access the walls, or if you have attics full and you can't even get through there. I mean, those homes typically are harder to sell on my end.
Oh, yeah, I understand. And, and people are moving. We understand that people have been in a house for a number of years and they have to move, and they've bought boxes and they're putting things in boxes and they're stacking. But, we get it.
But you can get around it.
Yeah.
For you personally, what are some of the craziest things you've seen during a home inspection?
Well, there's been a few. Some of them were not as funny at the time, and were a little bit. They're a little bit more funny now. I had a situation in a fairly nice home. It was in actually this part of town in Roswell here, and it was a 2-story house on a basement. And I was finishing up. There was no one there. The seller, of course, was not there, and the buyer could not attend. And I was ready to inspect the attic, and of course, just pull down attic stairs. You grab the little cord and you pull the hatch down, and the stairs unfold. So I pulled the steps down, and there was a raccoon that fell out. And there was something wrong with it, and it scared the daylights out of me. But the raccoon came down, and it was kind of hanging on the steps, and I stepped back, and then it fell to the floor, and then it ran off down the hall, and it went into a bedroom.
And so, what did you do?
Well, I call the listing agent and say, hey, the inspection went really well, but there just so happens to be a raccoon loose.
And I'm not chasing it.
I'm going to do what I can here. But yeah, that when I went into the attic, I noticed that, unbeknownst to the seller, that there was some damage on the edge of the roof where there was a tree close by, and animals had been chewing a spot through the siding and the trim, and the raccoon got in. It wasn't funny at the time, but it's kind of funny now.
No, I think I would have not only been on the floor with the raccoon, but I would have been like, guys, I'm out of here. I'm done. Yeah. So in home inspections, I know that a lot of times in new construction, buyers don't feel like they need a home inspection because, and again, if you go into new construction, they're not going to push it. That's why it's good to have representation in new construction. But I strongly feel like it's important to get a phase inspection. Tell us a little bit what a phase inspection entails.
Right. So a phase inspection is mostly going to, the most common phase inspection is going to be a pre-drywall inspection. Mm-hmm. So a pre-drywall inspection means just that. It's an inspection of the framing and the rough-in plumbing, electrical, mechanical, before the insulation and the drywall go in. Mm-hmm. So the inspection during that phase is a glimpse of the house before anything goes on. I mean, we may never see the house like that again.
Exactly.
So we're going through just room to room, basically walking slowly, looking up and down, looking for common framing defects, attachment, protection plates, the plumbing rough-in, just to be sure that everything is done according to standards. And we do find things. A house is made of a lot of parts. And for the most part, the county inspectors are actually pretty good, but they carry a heavy load. The county inspector may have 10 stops to make in a day, where we have 2. So when we go through a house for a pre-drywall stage, we can spend much more time and have much more attention to detail and scrutiny than maybe a county inspector has the ability to because of their workload.
Yeah.
So, we do find things that are usually easily corrected. In more recent years, most of the builders are actually appreciative of it. They, there's a lot of parts to a house, and it's easy to overlook things. And so, we go through and we do the best we can, and we find what we find, and we issue a report. And the builder often gets the report, and then they take action after that.
I mean, I appreciate it because, and I would think builders would as well, because you have so many different contractors in a home during the building process. And, especially in the last couple of years, it's like they're trying to get through these homes quickly, right? They're trying to mass produce, and you have subcontractors. So when you have that pre-drywall inspection, it's honestly, you're saving a lot of heartache, because if you have somebody look at it before they put the insulation in the drywall, if there's something that it could be a potential leak or not wired correctly or something like that, if you catch it before the drywall and the insulations in, you can save yourself from a potential fire, a potential leak down the road. I mean, it's just a really good idea. I always encourage it. How about that right before they close? Like, what does that look like?
So a new home final inspection. So that is when the house is completed or nearly completed. It's very rare that we actually do a new home final inspection where the house is 100% done and clean. So the condition of the house for new home final should be that most everything is in, cabinets, fixtures, whatnot, and all of the utilities are on. So we want to have the water, the electricity on, the gas on if available, and we would like to have the HVAC in place and the appliances in place. But if they're not, we can still do the inspection. The house does not need to be clean. Oftentimes we go through a new home final where there is cardboard over the countertops and there's plastic liners in the tubs to keep debris out of them. They're a bit of a mess. But we do kind of take a look at the final and the finish work during the new home final. And of course, here in Atlanta, we are doing code type stuff. So there are many cosmetics in a new home final. And we explain that to buyers of new home finals. What we're looking for is code related type items.
Gotcha.
Because the code is for the most part black and white. It either is or isn't. It's got to be this far or that far. Where cosmetic things would be things like maybe cabinet doors that are not level, or maybe a little bit of a wave in the crown molding on the ceiling.
Exactly.
Things like that. And those are important, but those are subjective. And those things need to be identified through the buyer's eyes as opposed to ours.
Exactly. So typically what I've found that most builders, if you have a phase inspection or a home inspection from an independent inspector, and again, RA is who I use often because there's paperwork that they have to turn over to the builder. So you're going to have your orientation and your final walkthrough with the builder, and that's typically your cosmetic things. You want to have an inspector come out prior to that walkthrough because they're going to find those code things. And a builder is not going to push back if an inspector comes in and finds code violations. They're going to go ahead and take care of that. And the things that I have found with having an inspection with new construction was the dishwasher wasn't properly attached, and so when they turned it on, it went everywhere. Or the drain pan for the HVAC and the attic was clogged and it was collecting water, things like that, that honestly we wouldn't have looked for during our home, a home inspection. Also, like if the windows aren't done properly. So a lot of times they'll throw those windows in, and there's certain windows that need to be tempered because they're like fall hazards or close to, I don't know the code, but I just know it comes up. So again, it's, to me, especially like right now, the price of houses, if you're buying a $500,000 house, a $300,000 house, a $7 million house, whatever it is, it's a lot of money to you. Why not pay the extra money to have someone just take a second glance, right? That's how I feel.
Sure. We do find a lot of things like you mentioned there, but we do find also more important things. We do find structural issues with houses. We do find, especially houses with basement, we sometimes find the load alignment is not correct, or even in an attic we find broken trusses all the time. And actually many houses have broken trusses and the sellers don't know. And we find those things on new construction, we find them in resales. So it's a little bit of a different inspection for a new home final. We're typically not going to find decay and rot and age and wear like you would for a resale home. So it is a little bit of a different type. And yes, builders do require certain credentials from inspectors, and I think that's very fair for a builder to require that the home inspectors have a certain amount of experience and
insurance.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think that's very important. That's something you and I were talking about briefly before we started recording, was the fact that home inspectors in the state of Georgia don't have to be licensed.
No, they do not have to be licensed. So that's an important point, because all of the states around Georgia require a home inspector to be licensed. I do not know why that is. I go get my hair cut, and the person cutting my hair has their license right in front of me.
Exactly.
So, but home inspectors do not. So until the state can get it together and require a license for home inspectors, we as an RIA, we have to adopt a standard so that the public knows what inspectors are going to do and what they can't do and what they won't do, what the report's going to look like. So there are national organizations which have standards. And the one that we follow is the American Society of Home Inspectors. It's known as ASHI. So ASHI's been around for a long time, and ASHI does have a standard of practice. And so some of the states around us actually have adopted the ASHI standards as the state-specific SOP. But we follow that, and we have the ASHI standards available in our report through links, and so that the clients and buyers know exactly what's going to happen during the home inspection process.
So tell us a little bit about your home inspection process. Like, what does it look like on the inspector's standpoint? I always tell my clients, yes, you're more than welcome to go out, but wait till the last hour because I know y'all have a process. What does that process typically look like for you guys, so they understand like why we don't necessarily... Me personally, I don't want my clients to show up and be right up underneath the inspector the whole time. I feel like it kind of is distracting. I want you to get in and do your thing. So will you explain that process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So depending on the size and the age of the house, the inspections can last 2.5, sometimes 3 hours, a little bit less for things like condos and whatnot. But it's a very particular routine. So the inspectors do need to keep their focus on the house and what's going on in front of them. And the inspectors do fill out the report as they go and take lots and lots of pictures, document things. So they typically start on the exterior of the home and make several passes around, looking at all the exterior surfaces and the roof and the deck and any equipment, electrical that's outside. And then they kind of start working their way through the interior, checking all of the plumbing, all of the electrical, windows, doors, outlets. Just looking for anything that was, wear and tear, broken, leaking, damaged, inoperable, stuff like that. So as far as the client or the buyer, their engagement during the inspection, It is best if they do come out a little bit towards the end, because the inspector will have a much bigger picture of what they found and can give them a verbal summary on site.
Mm-hmm.
But we also understand that in today's market, we have people that haven't spent a lot of time in the house. Maybe they've been house shopping for the last 2 weeks, and maybe they've seen 5, 6, 10 different houses.
Mm-hmm.
And so the inspection is oftentimes the last time that a buyer may get to spend any length of time in the house before they close. So, in my experience, sometimes buyers, they like to show up at the inspection. Sometimes they like to show up at the beginning. We do an introduction. I kind of explain what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to, follow around and ask a few questions here and there. And then after a while, they get to, like measure walls and for drapes, or kind of, mentally move in where their furniture is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And we as inspectors, we update them throughout the process as they go. So we fully understand that when we're hired to do an inspection, that we work for the client.
Exactly.
And if they want to be there and spend time in the house, that is certainly their prerogative to do that.
I respect that. For me, still, if you're with me, wait till the last hour.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I know, like in Georgia, we're still running into some items that are what I would call red flags on an inspection. So we still run into some poly piping, and we run into some synthetic stucco, Atlas Chalet shingle, and some other shingles. Right. We still run into some LP siding. Right. So explain those items, like when those type of items come up, like can you give me a little explanation of like how you explain that to the client?
Sure. So over the years and decades, there are several building products that were introduced to the market that were later on found out to be not as good as advertised or problematic as years went by. So polybutylene was a big one that started in the early 80s. It was discontinued in right around 1995. And that there's some types of polybutylene are highly prone to failure. It's failed so much we very rarely see it anymore, but there are still plenty of houses that are built between the early 80s and 1995 that do have polybutylene pipe. It's a plastic material. And it tends to break.
Isn't it gray typically?
It is. There used to be a blue polybutylene, which was an underground pipe, and that had such a short lifespan. I have not seen active blue polybutylene in quite some time.
Which is good.
Most of that's been replaced. So, there are some plumbing materials which have been found to be problematic. Synthetic stucco was a material that gained popularity from early 80s up until maybe the mid to late 90s. And synthetic stucco, it's still available to use today. It's a great product, but back then the problem was the installation, not the product.
Gotcha.
So it was the way it was being put in. So stucco in general was a little bit problematic during that time because the building codes weren't as specific with how it had to be put in.
Gotcha.
So the installers were not necessarily providing a way for it to drain, which increased the amount of moisture behind the wall. And even in later years, the Atlas Chalet shingles, that was a type of shingle which was kind of made to look like an architectural shingle, but was not. And those are beginning to, I think in a few years, there won't be any of those left.
Yeah, and I know like certain insurance companies won't even write policies on those homes.
That was really problematic. But when we see those things, we certainly point them out to the buyers and let them know that what they have, how much of it they have. Anything can be fixed in a house.
Exactly.
Anything can be repaired. And as far as red flag items, those are things that people typically are not going to be expecting during the home inspection.
Exactly.
That's kind of what it is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about, another big scary word in home inspections is mold. So fortunately, you guys do mold testing as well. A lot of inspectors will cite anything that looks like an organic material as mold, and we know as realtors that it becomes a real issue if it causes like sometimes more concern than what it needs to. Sometimes it is what it is and it needs to be remediated. So it's nice that you guys have the mold testing component within your inspection company. But what are some of the like things that you would look for or like want buyers to know when they're going through a house to kind of raise suspicion for mold?
Right. So mold occurs when the conditions are right, right? So there has to be a certain, humidity level. There has to be, moisture being introduced in places that are not ventilated, where there's organic material for it to grow on. So buyers that are selecting houses that are built on crawl spaces, in our area, the crawl spaces kind of went out probably in the early 80s. That's when it kind of started going to slab and basement. But when a house is on a crawl space, and the crawl space is vented to the outside, you'll see small rectangle vents around the perimeter. Whatever the humidity is outside, it'll most likely be that in the house underneath, and there's not going to be not as much air movement in there. So those are conditions which are conducive to mold growth, and we often find some fungus growth on floor framing when we go into crawl spaces. Now, if there was a leak, unknown to the seller, the mold growth can get really bad. But sometimes we go into a crawl space and there's houses that are 50, 60 years old, and it probably had mold in it for 50 or 60 years, but it wasn't bad enough to really cause any adverse concerns. Now, some people are hypersensitive to mold, so they kind of need to know what's there. And in that case, we would do an air sample, indoor air quality test, where we would kind of check the indoor quality of the air. And we send those samples off to a lab. We do one outside as a constant, and we do one inside the house, so the lab can compare one to the other and see what's there. And we get that information to the client.
I can tell you, I'm so allergic to mold. So I'll tell my clients, like, look, I know this house. I don't care if they say they've never had a water leak or whatever. My eyes are pouring. Like, I'm asthmatic. I'll start feeling like I'm super sensitive. So I'm like, have an air quality test. And I can tell you there have been so many times, like in finished basements, that the seller had no idea. The buyers are like, Maggie, you're crazy. There's nothing here. And then there comes back mold, because some of us are like really sensitive to those spores. And it wasn't even necessarily bad mold. It was just...
Well, it could
triggered my asthma.
Yeah, most of the time when we do mold tests, it's not a really highly toxic type mold, but some people, they are allergic to things that I may not be allergic to, so they can really tell. Even houses with unfinished basements, we find that the basement, the humidity content is really high, and there's not a lot of ventilation in there, and we'll see it growing on studs and framing. If a house has an unfinished basement, it is always a good idea to have a dehumidifier running.
Absolutely. I tell my clients that all the time, because especially with the humidity here in Georgia, if it's unfinished and you don't have an HVAC system down there and circulating that air, you should always have a way to get that.
But even a house that has mold, that's a solvable problem. Right? There are other environmental things, even like radon gas. If a home has high radon levels, that is a solvable problem.
I just had a house come back with a 27.8 radon level, and we got it remediated and got it down to like, I think 1.4, right? Because we have a great mold, a radon guy, and I mean, those are solvable things. What would be one thing that you just feel like you would walk away if it was your house and you saw it? It's a deal killer. Okay,
so people ask us that all the time. People ask us, well, would you buy this house? And that's a fair question, and it's a difficult question to answer. And the answer that we typically give buyers is it's like this, is that people buy houses for different reasons. Some couples want to buy a house because they want their kid in that school district.
Exactly.
Or they want to live in this area of town because the commute is a lot closer to town. So there's all different reasons for buying a house. But the way I look at it is what you're buying the house for, your closing costs, then what it is the house needs and what it is you want, added together. Are you still at the right value, or are you upside down in it? Right? Any problem can be addressed in a house.
Sometimes it's lighter fluid in a match or a bulldozer. I have to tell you what I see.
Well, we get hired to inspect houses that aren't habitable.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Why would someone inspect a house that...
Because we have investors that buy them. They're buying these houses and they're putting money into them, and they're fixing them up, and they're making rentals. Back during the recession years ago, it was devastating for many people at that time, and there were houses that just were falling into disrepair really rapidly. There was a house during the recession, I can't remember whether it was St. Ives or St. Marlowe, and there was an owl living in the house. The house had been abandoned. These are houses like in the $1 million range at that time that had been abandoned. The owners just walked away from them, and the houses deteriorated rapidly, and wildlife was moving in. There were houses back then people were buying for under $50,000. It had no copper piping in it. The air conditioners were gone.
Got ripped out.
They were just destroyed, but people renovate them and rehab them and get it going. So it is not uncommon for us to inspect houses that are very highly distressed.
See, for me, when you say inhabitable, I think about like in town, like collapsing. But you just mean like like distress, been abandoned, you know, like foreclosure type situations.
Yes, we inspect houses with no running water, where there's no electricity in them, that have structural issues, and the buyers know that, but they want to see. Well, I know I may have to put $100,000 into this house, or 150, but I need to kind of know the extent of it.
And that's smart, because I have some investor friends that they do it so much and they build that they'll like go in and kind of blindly buy homes. And then I have this one gentleman that I followed his story on his house, and he found out that he thought it was like, I was going to have to like gut it and everything. Well, he ended up having to reframe the whole house because it was infested with termites. Like when they got in there and started pulling walls out, it was completely infested with termites. Those are all good learning lessons when you're in real estate and you're an investor and you flip. You learn that lesson probably one time, and the next time.
So I think that the biggest red flag for buyers is probably what it's going to cost to get the house the way they want it.
Yeah,
and
add that on the margins.
Add it down to the price, what their buying price, and then the closing, and see where they are. Because we inspect houses that are being lived in. And they're kept up pretty well, but the house is at a point where it needs a new roof, 2 new air conditioners, a new deck, and there's wood rot on exterior window trim and doors. Well, all that added together can be a tremendous price tag.
Absolutely.
So, that's really where the red flags come into, is the price of repair or reconditioning the house to get it where you want it.
That if it all makes sense, if the math makes sense. I run into that a lot, like with windows, the framing around the windows. When you look at the house, like if you're walking up to the house, it looks fine, and then you get a little closer, and you can literally stick your thumb through the wood frame of the window. And they've caulked and put a thick coat of paint trying to cover it up, and then you go in the back, and the deck is not secured. And they're like, "We've been on this deck the last 20 years," and it's like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't go out there right now." Those type of things are very common, but again, very fixable, right?
They are
willing to put money towards that.
They are, and the economy that we're in now, where things are more expensive, labor is more expensive, people's incomes aren't keeping up with the inflation that we have going on. We come across a lot of things now which are do-it-yourself type repairs, and we understand why, because homeowners are at a point where they don't have $600 to replace a garbage disposal. So they go on YouTube and they buy one, they put it in the best they can. So when we come and inspect the house, we see things that may be functional, but they're not technically correct.
Gotcha.
We're seeing more and more of that now, as people are having to rely on YouTube and other instructional formats to do things that are a little bit out of their skill set.
Here in Georgia, we have what's called a due diligence period, and that's the period of time that you are supposed to use for your inspections and to work through your amendment to address concerns. Also, during your due diligence period in Georgia, you could walk away for any reason and get your earnest money back. So that kind of sometimes works against us, because people will ask for like a 5 to 7 day due diligence, and then they call y'all and want you to come out on day 6, the last day. Ideally, when do you feel like, if you had a 5-day window, when should that inspection be scheduled?
As soon as possible, because it's very possible that the results of the inspection may require a more specialized skill or trade to come out and take a look at it. So home inspectors are generalists. So when we go through a house, we check the systems, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, roof, whatnot, and if we see that more, or we feel that more investigation, evaluation, repair is needed, we actually call for that. And if it's not needed, we don't. So it's very possible that during the inspection, results may yield information about needing someone else to come take a look at a certain component.
Like an expert on that.
Yeah, like we come across issues with decks all the time. You were talking about the older decks, and we come across that all the time. Well, we can't really give a price on that. We can't say, well, it's going to be $6,500 to do this work on this deck. We would need to refer that to a deck contractor, and the buyer may need that information before the end of their due diligence period.
Absolutely.
So we do get our reports out right away. So when we get scheduled, the report will be ready within 24 hours. Most of the time, it's going to be ready that same day.
So we love that you also provide us with that PDF version.
Yeah, so when we send out the report, we send it out as a link, and then from there, you can convert it to a PDF if you like. And our report also has some really useful tools. There is a feature where you can pull up the summary only, and then there's a real easy copy and paste tool where you can put it into an amendment. There's also a repair request builder where you can go through the summary and you can kind of flag items that you would like the seller to repair, or some things you need a credit on, and then you can email that whole thing out to the listing agent. So it's really useful, and our report is not only is the language really geared toward helping the real estate agents out and the buyer as well, but also the way the report is designed. There are some tools that realtors can use to kind of help facilitate the process.
Yeah, over the many years I've been in real estate and the different inspection reports that I've seen, it definitely is very client realtor friendly. So
yeah, it has to be. I mean, that's basically that's the product that home inspection companies make, is the report. And we understand there's some technical parts of a house, and we don't really need to. We try not to use really technical terms if we can avoid it, because we understand that this information needs to be used at a very critical time. Buyers are oftentimes sometimes a little bit stressed, a little bit emotional, and it's a difficult process buying a house.
Another thing that I appreciate about you guys is that, oftentimes you will run into inspectors with maybe not as much, maybe they started, like you said, they don't have to be licensed. Maybe they did something else in their career before. I don't know what they're thinking, but I call them my deal killers. And they will cause so much concern for things that I feel like other inspectors wouldn't cause concern. And then it's just like they kind of disappear. So another thing that I really appreciate about your inspection company is not only do you write it in a way that's very digestible for the consumer, but I can tell you that every time I've had an inspection with you guys, the inspector calls me prior to and asks me, hey, is there anything that you want me to focus on? And afterwards, I have their contact information. So if I have any questions about the inspection report, like, you guys are very accessible, and that helps navigate the process. So because not every single time the buyer can show up, and sometimes the realtors aren't there. During COVID, there was like no one could come. So I feel like a lot of us have gotten, unless it's something specific, we're not necessarily always there. So it's nice to have that communication, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, a home inspection is no place for drama. So we don't need to be, there's no reason to overemphasize a problem. We find major problems in houses all the time. But just like I said earlier, most everything in a house can be fixed.
Yeah.
So we present the information and the way that we find it, and we get it out. And if we understand that people have questions and have concerns afterwards, and we're always open to discuss after the fact.
So I know we're talking about inspections being like a general inspection. So obviously you guys offer some additional services. So what are some add-ons to inspections that you feel like it's valuable for the consumer to know that they have access to?
Right. So along with regular home inspections, we can do radon gas testing.
Okay.
If the house has a pool, we can do a pool inspection, a general operational check of the equipment, of the pool equipment, the barriers, the plumbing, things like that.
Okay.
We also, if the house has stucco, whether it's hard coat or synthetic, we can do moisture testing of the framing behind the stucco, which can be important. A lot of houses built from the early 80s to the mid 90s in our area, especially Roswell, Alpharetta, a lot of them have stucco.
And East Cobb.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a lot of it. And we can do moisture testing of the framing behind the stucco. And another service we can do that would apply to any house would be sewer pipe testing. So a sewer pipe inspection, not testing, but an inspection. So remember, the home inspection is visual. The sewer pipe is underground, and no part of it is visible during a general home inspection.
Yeah.
But we have camera rigs that we can actually put into a sewer, and we can start at the clean out, which is the little thing with the cap on it that's either in a crawl space or basement or in a yard, and we run the camera down the length until we connect to the city connection. Okay. Or we get to the septic tank if it happens to be a house on septic, and we can see what the sewer pipe looks like. That's not thought of a whole lot during an inspection, but we do find issues. We find tree root invasion. We find places where maybe the bobcat or the skid steer ran over the top of the pipe and pushed the dirt down, and the pipe's got a big sag in it underground. Oh, wow. So we find things like that all the time with those. So it's a good add-on service to do.
Yeah, I mean, I probably ran into that one time where it was an out-of-state buyer. I can say personally, I haven't had a lot of in-state buyers ask for that. So that's good to know that you guys offer that, because that, as you're explaining it, makes perfectly good sense. Because as a home buyer, you're responsible for the pipes until you get to the public.
Yes,
right?
from your house all the way up to the city connection is yours. So if the county required tree that was planted in the front yard when it was new, if that root ball spreads out and puts downward pressure on that sewer pipe may bend or break or have roots in it, and you would never know until you start having sewage back up into the lowest shower, which is not fun. So that's why I think a sewer pipe inspection is really good.
That is a really good add-on. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It was super informative. Like I was saying earlier, I really appreciate the fact that you make everything very consumable for both the buyer, the seller, the realtor. And we just really appreciate you coming in.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. And we hope you found this very informative. And if you have any further questions, reach out to us. You guys have a wonderful day. Bye, my loves.